Captain's Log, Stardate 47634.44. After months of careful planning, preparation, and shakedown time, the ship and its fine crew of the USS TREKnological are ready for their maiden voyage. The continuing mission for Co-Captain Vactor and myself, Co-Captain Shoff, is to explore strange new worlds of Star Trek TV shows and films, and seek out new ways to fit Star Trek into our busy lives as dads. To boldly go where no podcast has gone before. Welcome to TREKnological, a Star Trek shakedown. I am Co-Captain Shoff. With me on the line is Co-Captain Vactor. How you doing, Vactor?
Very well. I've been very excited to start this podcast with my boy Shoff, Mr. Co-Captain himself. I can't wait. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something we've been working on for a few months now and getting the logistics down. It's hard because when you're two hardworking dads, you have limited time. Vactor has a young toddler boy. How old is he now?
He actually turns 1 year in 5 days.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's awesome. Well, happy early birthday. Are we saying our kid's name? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so happy early birthday to Ezra.
Yeah.
I have one toddler girl. She is just about 20 months. In March, she'll be 20 months old. And I also have another one on the way. The artwork for our podcast, our logo, does show two children in my hands, but we're just planning ahead. The handful is real.
Nice.
So, but I have two girls, or at least I will have two girls. So definitely our hands are full, busy schedules. We've got a couple other podcasts that we do, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But definitely, we appreciate you, and thank you so much for tuning in to our very first episode of TREKnological. We are a spin-off podcast, a short-form Star Trek podcast, but a spin-off of the Geek, So to Speak network. So Geek, So to Speak podcast began about 5 years ago between myself and my dear best friend, Wonder Rob, and Wonder Rob is also a dear best friend to Vactor, and so I know Vactor through Wonder Rob. He and I were arch nemesis for a long time because we were vying for the best friendship tier of Wonder Rob. And then Wonder Rob was like, hey, it's a tier. It's not, I can have more than one. And then we were like, oh, okay, I guess we're friends now. So, so we came together over our mutual love of my co-host of Geek, So to Speak, which is also a weekly podcast. But then as things progressed, we realized there was so much content and not enough time to fit it all in. And we wanted to be able to expand on other topics, so we created a Star Trek spin-off podcast called TREKnological. There's also a Star Wars spin-off podcast called The Holdo Maneuver, and that features Vactor as well as our very own Cinemark of Geek, So to Speak, and they talk about all things Star Wars. And that's going pretty well so far, Vactor, right?
So far, so good. We've got 2 episodes out, and we actually was planning episode 3 earlier this morning.
Awesome. Yeah, so I've been able to listen to those episodes, and they sound great, and they're available anywhere you listen to podcasts. So definitely check out the Holdo Maneuver. And then there's another one in the works, but I won't get into that yet because we're still working on some additional like logo stuff and things, so I don't want to spoil the fun on that or steal that thunder. So, but moving on... Hopefully you'll rate us 5 stars if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, or review us on Apple Podcasts, or even Spotify is another place you can do that. On Anchor, if you at the bottom of our link, we will have a way for you to reach out to us if you'd like to ask us questions, or if you want to give us a shout out, or if you want to recommend something. You can do that there. And also, you can choose to become a monthly supporter too. We like that. So there's lots of ways to help this podcast grow. Seeing that it's our first episode and you are officially meeting the crew. So now, Co-Captain Vactor, This past week, we actually got some Star Trek news, which was kind of out of the blue, and it was unexpected, not just for us, but unexpected for the actors involved. Did you hear about this news related to Star Trek 4?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. I did hear about this, and I was just as surprised as Chris Pine.
It's wild. It's wild. I don't like. Part of me wonders, like, is that really possible? Can you really announce a movie without talking to your cast about it first? Like,
right.
in the scheduling nightmare that would be. Like,
right.
To say you're going to start filming at the end of the year, like, what if these other actors have plans?
Yeah, exactly.
They have to grow out their hair or have a beard. We're not going to have mustache gate in Star Trek, are we? Like, I mean, like, what's going on here? So, but yeah, J.J. Abrams announced during a Paramount Investor Day that they're going to be beginning this sequel to Star Trek Beyond. And it's going to feature the original cast from the Kelvin timeline, if you will. Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto and Simon Pegg. Yeah, Carl Urban, Zoe Saldana, John Cho. So they're supposed to all come back. I mean, I hope they all do come back.
That was always, to me, the strongest part of the Kelvin timeline movies was the cast.
Absolutely. It was a really good group. I have to say, it was really a sad thing knowing that Anton Yelchin he died and was no longer going to be able to continue on his Chekhov. Like, that was such a tragic passing for him.
Yeah.
And definitely his like, not having him around is going to be felt on whatever 100%. Next movie they do. So
yeah, I was actually just thinking about that the other day. I just, from time to time, because the way that he passed away was also like very strange, tragic. A car rolling down a hill, and I was thinking about that the other day. And anytime I'm in a situation where a car is rolling down a hill, I think about that, and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to get Yelchined on that.
Does this happen often? Do you see cars rolling down hills often?
This is maybe getting a little bit too much into my own personal phobias, but I have a fear that a car will one day back over me and take me out of this world.
Oh my gosh.
I don't see it on a day-to-day basis, but I have a phobia of it.
Wow. First episode, and we're really meeting the crew on a very deep level. We're learning about their greatest fears. Well, every captain has a fear. It's okay. That's what makes you a stronger captain in the long run. This film is supposed to start filming in the fall with a theatrical release of December 22nd of 2023. Not that far out. I mean, with knowing like how much, visual effects goes into these movies, and the fact that the script is still being worked on and there's no official green light or budget in place, like, that seems really unrealistic to say that we're going to have another Star Trek movie at the end of 2023. I mean, I hope we do. I hope it's good.
Right.
Do you have a favorite of the three of the Kelvin timeline Star Trek films?
The first one, 100%.
Oh,
that movie blew me away in the theater. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did. And each one after that, just my thoughts and feelings on it just lowered and lowered, and then now my expectations are now down here. But that very first one, I would say it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
It's interesting. When I was thinking about, after seeing Spider-Man, and spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home, I bet you didn't think we were going to talk about Marvel on a Star Trek podcast, but with Tom Holland always, having to keep spoilers under wraps, and then spoiler alert, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield joining the cast and them being part of it as their Spider people and stuff, like, and having to lie over and over and over and over again. I thought back to when Benedict Cumberbatch had the same situation.
Oh, right.
Everyone was like, you're playing Khan, right? Like, you're clearly playing Khan. And he was like, no, I'm not. I'm not playing Khan. And I feel like that was one of the first, like, very recognizable moments in, like, the geek news where an actor had to really downplay and sort of, like, try to mislead and misdirect people on the casting, because he wasn't even the original choice. It was supposed to be I want to say Efren Ramirez or something like that. I can't remember. But the fact that he ended up being Khan, as soon as that moment happened in the film, I was like, I had an audible groan because it was like I felt lied to, and I felt deceived, and it was not a good feeling. So, but just thinking about like Spider-Man and now Star Trek, like it's wild. Like the actors that have to keep things quiet for so long.
Right. And I had the same experience in the theater as well. And I thought about people who didn't have that experience, people who don't follow film news like we do, and they just, all right, I'm going to go watch the Star Trek movie, and they see it. Oh, that's Khan. Okay. Maybe they were surprised by it, but we knew going into it. Luckily for me, I was not that way with Spider-Man. I did not know. I didn't see any of the leaks. I didn't have any clue. And so when it hit, it hit. It wasn't a groan for me. It was, oh yes, they're in these other Spider-Man. So yeah, it's funny that I think those are the two like most high profile ones that we've seen where, all right, we can now say you were lying to us the entire time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the movie was pretty good. I thought Beyond was probably the worst of the three. Although it does have a pretty epic moment with the Beastie Boys song when they're riding this wave of oh gosh, was it Mines or something? I can't recall.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that was a wild scene. But anyway, so yeah, this news is pretty wild. Now, there's been a lot of movies over the years that are supposed to be in Star Trek 4. I mean, Quentin Tarantino was potentially going to make a film. Then Noah Hawley, who he was involved with that Legion show for Marvel on Hulu or Fox.
Right.
And then Matt, was it Shankman?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Matt Shackman. He was the director of WandaVision. He was also set to be involved. Now, that may still be the case, but they don't really have that information shared yet. But there was even plans. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. There were plans for at least multiple Star Trek films to be happening at the same time.
Oh wow.
So I don't know what's going to happen with this. I like the fact that we've got a cast coming back, but if we don't have any story yet, we don't have a script finished, we don't have a budget, they want to start filming at the end of the year, it just doesn't seem possible.
Yeah. Or it'll happen and it's not going to be very good because it's going to be rushed. They're not going to have everything in place. And yeah, I just don't see it realistically happening either.
Yeah. I want them to take their time. If they're going to do this right, they got to take their time. I mean, it's the fourth movie. So, at that point, they kind of just becomes a cash cow, right? You just try to, milk it for all it's worth. But you think about like Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. I love that film. That's such a great film, and it holds up over time. It's such a unique Star Trek film because of the design of it being time travel, going back to the 80s, dealing with humpback whales. Like it's so like original. Plus, it's not even featuring the Enterprise until the way end. Like you've got them, riding in the the Klingon bird of prey. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to whatever happens. We'll certainly review it when it does come out, but we've got some time until that happens.
Yeah.
Now coming back to, so this episode, really, we're just kind of focused on meeting the crew. So knowing that Star Trek Picard is coming out next week officially for its first episode, that's when we'll really kick off our recaps and reviews. But since we're a new podcast and we're coming together, we thought it would be a good idea just to give our listeners a chance to sort of get to know us. And also for Vactor and I to really better understand just our love for Star Trek and what that means for us. So I got a question for you, Vactor. This has been burning in my mind. I have to know the answer to it. Trekkie or Trekker? What do you identify as?
For me, it's Trekkie, and it's because of the way that I was first introduced to it. The term Trekkie came first for me. Later on, learned Trekker, but it's something that goes back to my dad, I think, and he first introduced me to Star Trek with the original series, and it was reruns of the original series. Then it was Next Generation reruns. At the time, I want to say Next Generation was like maybe in the 5th season at that point.
Okay.
And I was just watching reruns And then from there on, I was watching each show. But that was where my original kind of my grasp on Star Trek came from, was my dad. And so Trekkie was the first term that I heard. So it's always sounded better to me, just the phonetics of it. And that's what I identify as.
Yeah, it's weird to me that it's kind of like you're either one or the other. I've always identified as Trekkie as well. Trekker feels strange. Like Trekker feels like more like something you would identify as if you liked hiking.
Right.
Like it doesn't seem like, to me, it doesn't make sense to be called that, but there's definitely two sides of the aisle on that.
There's actually a documentary, I don't know if you ever saw it, that came out in 97 called Trekkies.
Oh yeah, I used to own it actually. I remember having the DVD. Yeah. But I'm definitely a Trekkie. Now, you said your dad got you into Star Trek.
Yes.
Is it just your dad that's into Star Trek, or does your mom like Star Trek as well?
No, my mom is strictly Star Wars, and
okay,
a lot of the things that my mom that she posts about these days are things that I love. So let's say Star Wars, Dragon Ball, Marvel, DC. She'll post about those things. Oh yeah, I just got this Batman pizza, but it's really my love that she takes on, and I think it's also just for her, maybe even on a subliminal level, to show support for me. But she never really, like, she watched the Kelvin films just because they were new films that were coming out.
Yeah.
But I don't think she would go back and watch old Trek movies. So yeah, for specifically my love of it, it was from my dad, and he's always been into science fiction, and I think the captains are really what he's drawn to. Picard and Kirk in general, those were his favorites. So those became my favorites as I was growing up. And even to this day now, I'll tell my dad, hey, Dad, there's a new Star Trek. Oh, yeah, I want to watch that, whether it's a movie or a TV show.
Well, hey, shout out to your parents, especially your Trekkie dad. Hopefully they'll get a chance to listen to this episode and give us a shout out. We appreciate that. For myself, getting into Star Trek came from my uncle. My parents, my dad was never really a sci-fi fan. My mom, she knew it, but my mom's brother, my uncle, Carrie is his name. He's the one who got me into pretty much anything geek related. So like I have a ton of comic book issues that are currently displayed on my wall, and we're not doing a video podcast, so this doesn't really help you, but I have a bunch of issues from 1970s. I've got a bunch of issues from the 1960s, and these are all his. And he was definitely my gateway to anything Marvel, anything DC, anything Star Trek. He loved Star Trek, especially The Next Generation. I definitely resonated much more with the TNG cast and Captain Picard. True testament, I have not seen all of the original series episodes, so I'm looking forward to when we do have some downtime between new content and we go back and start rewatching the original series and moving forward through the seasons. I'm looking forward to doing that because I kind of just started at the TNG and I've only dipped my toes in the TOS. Now, granted, I've seen all the films. I've definitely know my way around the crew of all the various enterprises, but my focus has always been from TNG onward. I loved Voyager. Voyager was definitely one of my favorite shows. I wish they didn't take so many detours to get home. It was like constantly, but we should probably also stop for eggs on the way. Do you need ice cream? Okay, we'll go to this planet for ice cream.
Yeah.
But DS9, I sort of found much later in my I would say late teenage adult, like early adult life, because when you're younger, you're kind of like, I want them to be on a ship. I want them to, be exploring and it be more movement. And when the show is focused on a space station, you're like, this sounds boring to me. But I can appreciate it now because there's some of the best character development of any of the shows on DS9. So looking forward to going to that too. This is probably a loaded question, but do you have a favorite captain or a favorite show? I mean, you kind of said Next Generation, but like, do you have a favorite captain?
Yeah, it's for me. There isn't a clear. It's kind of difficult for me because I love all of them. Really, there isn't a captain I don't like. Although Discovery, I'm not as I need to get caught up on Discovery, so I don't have as much affinity for that show. But all of the other ones, there's not a captain I don't like. But Picard is I was like you. I think Next Generation was the one where I really fell in love. The original series, I thought at the time, oh, that's old.
Yeah.
And I've grown to appreciate it more now. And I think actually one thing that you might be surprised by is how well the original series holds up. Now the special effects, those aren't as much, but the storytelling, the characters, the writing, all of that could be released today and it's still, great. So when I'm also eager to jump back into the original series again because I just felt like the writing was so strong. And that's something that I think is present throughout all of the shows. Each one, and this is something I didn't mention before. I was actually specifically Star Wars when I was growing up. I was like, Trek is for old guys and nerds. Star Wars is for the cool kids. We got lightsabers.
Trek is from my dad.
Yeah. But I kept getting sucked in on reruns. And so every series I kept on getting pulled back in. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, I'll just watch this a little bit, and then the episode is over. That was a great episode. Again, it's always the writing and the characters that stood out for me. And each one of those captains, I just came to fall in love with all of them. I would say probably Picard overall, but I love Kirk. Janeway is my wife's favorite, and then she also loves Picard. But and now I've been introducing her to the series as well.
Sure.
And so now I like Janeway more than I did because of my wife's love of the character. And I just like Scott Bakula from Quantum Leap. So
yeah.
that's why.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I like Cisco and him being the first black captain. That was something that, was kind of a milestone and was interesting to me. So yeah, I like all of them, but if you ask me to narrow it down to one, it's got to be Picard.
Yeah. It's interesting that DS9 started and Cisco was not a captain. He was a commander. Like that was kind of a unique approach.
Right.
In regards to that. But yeah, no, all of them great captains. I would just have to say probably Captain Picard is my favorite. I do love Janeway. I love Scott Bakula, but I don't really love Archer.
As a character.
I think just Enterprise in general, the show had an interesting premise initially, and then it kind of just went its own way. I think that show was plagued with a problem that a lot of shows get plagued with is when you try to do like a prequel series, and this was supposed to take place, I think, 100 years before Kirk and Spock. You pigeonhole yourself because the lore indicates that, okay, the Federation doesn't meet this species until this point. They don't have any contact with this until this. So like you really have to tell great stories that don't rely on familiar characters or alien species. And when you start to get into that, you run a very fine line of messing with your own lore and then retconning stuff and messing things up. And so I think like that show, for me, I trailed off towards the end. Like I really tried to be loyal to it, but it was not my favorite. It felt like a chore towards the end to watch it. But I definitely look forward to rewatching it and hopefully maybe falling back in love with it. We'll see what happens. Discovery is awesome. I love Discovery.
Man, I really want to get caught up on that. I started watching it when it first came out, and then just life happened, and I fell behind, and there wasn't a TREKnological to force me to get back into it. So that's also another reason why I wanted to start this podcast with you, to hold me accountable and say, okay, this is going to make you a deadline. You have to watch it. And so, I won't be falling behind, and I won't be, all right, I'll get to it someday. It's like, no, I'm getting to it right now because I got to talk to Shoff about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like that too, because if I didn't have Geek, so to speak, there's so many games I never would have played. There's so many movies I wouldn't have gone to see or TV shows I wouldn't have watched. Like it causes you to make the time for these kinds of things, which is good. Because when you're a dad and you got toddlers you're trying to manage and you got a full-time job and you're trying to be an attentive partner, and there's only so much time available.
Right.
So you really just have to like make the time for the things that you love and are important. So, now with TREKnological, our focus initially is going to be on the new stuff. So there's a lot of new shows and content coming in 2022. It's a big year for Star Trek. It's kind of wild. So we've got Discovery season 4 is actually running right now. They just came back. They were on like a winter break of some kind. And they just came back. They returned on February 10th and they've got new episodes. I am not caught up on that show, but I was kind of just wanting to wait until the season was done. And knowing that we were going to do this podcast, I was like, it doesn't help me to start a show that we're not going to be reviewing right away. So I figured I would hold off on that. But I did watch the first episode of season 4 last night, and it was really interesting. Blew me away. So I'm looking forward to talking about that in the future. But coming up next, we've got Picard season 2, which is going to debut on March 3rd. We've got Strange New Worlds, which is going to be the adventures of Captain Pike and Spock, as well as Number 2 and a bunch of other crew members of the original Enterprise. And it's going to be featuring Anson Mount as Pike from the Discovery TV show. He's an excellent Captain Pike. I did not like Captain Pike until he was played by this guy. So this show is going to be awesome. Looking forward to it. That's on May 5th. We've got Lower Decks, which is the animated Star Trek comedy show. And that's going to be entering its 3rd season later this year after Strange New Worlds. There's no official date on it. We also have another animated Star Trek show, Prodigy, and their second half of season 1 is going to be later in 2022 with a second season that might air at the end of 2022. So no shortage of Star Trek content. Not to mention all the other shows that have preceded these and the films. And there's even been video games that I remember playing and stuff. Like, we're going to just crack it open and talk about all things Star Trek. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, the goal of our podcast is to make sure that we're conscious of the busy days that not just we have, but also other hardworking parents out there and Star Trek fans have. So we try to keep our episodes around 30 minutes, and that's just so that it's content that's easily digestible. So with that in mind, we're going to definitely aim to do that each week. So hopefully, fingers crossed, Vactor, we're able to make that possible. But one thing we wanted to do, something kind of fun, as part of our episode wrap-ups, is to introduce our audiences to maybe a Star Trek term you didn't know. I happen to have a Star Trek encyclopedia. I know, nerd alert. But it is a reference guide to the future. This is not super current, but it was written by Michael Okuda and Denise Okuda, who are Star Trek. How would I put this? They are. Their knowledge of Star Trek is ridiculous. They write a lot of episodes. They're consultants on a lot of episodes. They write books. They write these encyclopedias. They are, you may not know them, but you know them because they've been involved with anything you've watched. So the Okudas are our Star Trek family for sure. So I'm gonna open this encyclopedia, Vactor, to a random page. I have not pre-selected this. This is totally on the fly, impromptu, and I will then close my eyes and slam my finger down on a page. And whatever it lands on, I'm going to share that term. Are you ready, Vactor?
I'm ready.
Okay, I'm going to boldly go and do this right now. Here we go. I'm going to turn my page to right here, and I'm going to look down. Okay. All right, well, it landed on the character Morn. Morn. Now, Morn is actually fairly well known, so you guys might know this, but Morn, played by Mark Shepard, is the patron of Quark's Bar. at the promenade at Deep Space Nine. So he had 17 brothers and sisters. He once asked Jadzia Dax out for dinner, and she declined, even though she thought he was kind of cute. Now, if you were to look up Morn on Google, he's not cute. He is not remotely cute. I'll try to get a picture here for Vactor. Yeah. So anyways, he is part of, let's see if I have information on his species. His species was born with more than one heart. He's supposed to be sort of like the equivalent of George Wendt's character on Cheers, where he's just always at the bar. That was always the design of his character. And so like in every scene of Quark's bar, he's always sitting there on one of the stools. So it's kind of cool. He's a little cameo character. But if you don't know Morn, you got to watch some DS9 and you'll know what I'm talking about. With that, let's see where we're at for time. Oh, we are right there. Right on track. Okay, well, Vactor, I think that wraps up our first episode.
Nice.
Thank you so much to our listeners for tuning in and meeting the crew of the USS TREKnological. Thank you so much for listening. Now, if you're looking to find us on social media, our podcast is available at TREKnopod. That's TREKNOPOD, and that's going to be on Instagram and Twitter. Now, we're available to listen to pretty much anywhere podcasts are played, so you can always go through that. But on our social media, we have our Linktree website link, so you can just click that URL, and it'll bring you to all the possible places where you could listen to us as well. So makes it really easy for that. If you want to look for us individually on social media, myself, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Fiverr. I am a freelance voiceover actor, but I am at Shoff VO, SHOFF, V as in voice, O as in over, and then Vactor is at Vactor, VACTOR, on Twitter and Instagram. So with that in mind, for our show, we wanted to make sure to point out Geek So to Speak podcast. That is our zaddy of the of the Geek So to Speak network, our parent podcast, the one that started it all. And it's hosted by myself and our dear friend Wonder Rob. Now that is a weekly geek news podcast and your source for all things geek when we're talking about movies, TV shows, video games, comic books, etc. It's also the home to another spin-off podcast about all things Star Wars called, what is it called, Vactor?
The Holdo Maneuver.
That's right. The Holdo Maneuver, hosted by our very own Vactor and Geek So to Speak's Cinemark. Now, if you wanted to check out more information about Geek So to Speak, you can check out our website, www.geeksotospeak.com. And there's all information about our show, the YouTube Let's Plays that Wonder Rob is doing. We've got all sorts of social media content on there. And then there's even a page for our network, another way you can find our information for the Holdo Maneuver as well as TREKnological. And there's also another video game specific spinoff podcast coming shortly. More details to follow on that. So don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to rate us, review us. Next week, we are doing our review of Season 2, Episode 1 of Star Trek Picard.
Oh, yeah.
We can't wait. So any last thoughts, final words, Vactor?
Like I said, I'm very excited to do this podcast with you, Shoff. And there's two things. I'm really excited to get new people to Star Trek, introduce our love and why Star Trek is so great. And then also the people like us, returning fans, just give them something as well, reviewing all the new stuff, all the old stuff, and just telling everybody why we love the Star Trek universe. So I'm very excited to be doing this podcast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited to do this podcast with you and excited to get to just geek out about Star Trek because it's always nice to have somebody in your life to do that with. So that's fantastic. All right, folks. Well, then we will see you next week. Vactor, let's do it. 1, 2, 3.
Live long and prosper.